Yes, sir. Well, lean, I know a lot of you are already familiar with it, but I'm going to start with the assumption that at least some of you can benefit from an introduction. It definitely speaks to the idea of task switching and prioritization, but I'm going to actually take a step back and look at the principles without getting into a whole lot of details. And if we want to, we can go more in depth. But
two different personalities. What do you want to do in that photo?
That just makes me sick.
Isn't that still the past?
it's in Italy.
Three.
I don't know where.
Yeah.
That looks like a John.
Yeah, it's one of the
We're driving around.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's a bold statement, but I've been thinking about this. I probably stayed up a little too late last night putting this together, but if it drags or if I get too intense, just remind me to drink my beer and it'll be good.
Take a nap.
Yeah. So if you look closely at this picture, you realize that it's not Emsi's CS department.
Lower left.
Yes.
The first 11 employees at Microsoft. Bill Gates and Paul Allen founded Microsoft in 1975. In 1980, they partnered with IBM to bundle MS-DOS. In 85, they released the first version of Windows. In 86, they went public. In 89, they released what was then a revolutionary product, Microsoft Office, followed by the third version of Windows, then 95, 98, 2000, eventually gaining 90% of their market share. 20 years after starting Microsoft, in 1995, that guy in the lower left became the world's richest man. Fast forward 20 years to today's headline on the Wall Street Journal. Off on the left here, it says Microsoft, and you've probably heard of this already, is slashing up to 18,000 jobs, or 14% of its workforce, with most of the cuts coming from its phone and tablet staff. They acquired Nokia last year, and about 12,500 of those 18,000 are coming out of Nokia division. That leaves, that's not too surprising, but that leaves another 5,500 that are coming out of the non-Nokia divisions. If we go back to 2009, Microsoft did the same thing, laying off about 5,800 employees. And so we see that the trend at Microsoft has a lot more to, is not just isolated to Nokia. There are deeper problems afoot. If we look at their stock performance since they went public, it kind of shows us where things changed. We see this meteoric ascent, and then followed by pretty mediocre performance. Incidentally, Emsi turns 14 years old this year, and if we look at what Microsoft looked like at 14 years old, it was right there. I'm not predicting doom and gloom. We're very different companies, but I think it's interesting. Because change is inevitable, there's no success that Emsi's, there's no guarantee that Emsi's success will continue. At a Friday meeting in February, we were suggested this idea that we won't finish our careers at Emsi. And I think that it came from the data that bears out the fact that most people nowadays don't finish their career where they started. But I do think Emsi is unique, not only in how we recruit people, but in how we retain them. And so if you look at Microsoft laying off 18,000 employees, how many of those were planning to finish at Microsoft? If that's true, then Emsi's future success starts with us, and it starts today. A lot has changed just in Moscow over the last few years. You can see the New York itinerary there on the left, the silos that we used to sit right outside of over there on the right. In a quote from the USA Today on the Microsoft story, it said this, and it's pretty familiar. Change isn't easy nor pretty in tech. comes fast, furiously, and without much sentiment. Whenever a company, especially one as big as Microsoft, undergoes a transformation, it often leads to ruthless layoffs. It is a recurring story in the Silicon Valley narrative, but it is often necessary for survival. That might be true for Microsoft in this case, but I want to argue that that's a false statement because it ignores root cause, and it doesn't get to the bottom of the problem, which is that the fact that processes are fundamentally broken. There is another way besides ruthless layoffs, and that way for Emsi, obviously, is to in some way position ourselves for change by getting all of Emsi on board. And I would say in this presentation by looking at principles in this book. Raise your hand if you've seen it, this book. Almost everybody? Okay. How many have read part of it? And how about cover to cover? Okay, good. I made that my quarterly goal last quarter to read it, and so that's where this presentation is coming from. This is a software-specific book, but Lean, if you know more about it, is not a specific paradigm for software. In fact, it comes out of manufacturing. In one of the early chapters, it gives this approach to change. It's a little wordy, but I think it's at the heart of what Lean is. It says the empirical school starts with a high-level product concept and then establishes well-defined feedback loops that adjust activities so as to create an optimal interpretation of the concept. Any development process that deals with a changing environment should be an empirical process because it provides the best known approach for adapting to change. Thus, software development should be an empirical process. Most of you probably know that we live 8 miles away from a world-class manufacturing plant at SEL. I used to work there. I worked there for about 5 years in their R&D. And instead of telling you about them, I wanted to just play a real short video about their manufacturing in particular.
What impresses me about SEL manufacturing is really the focus on quality and the focus on our customer, and the fact that it's employee-owned. In order to make sure that we have high quality, we want the people to be engaged in our processes. As employee owners, we're all trying to do what we can to make sure that we're building the best products possible. Through process design and materials, the mean time between failure is over 500 years. It means we're making the highest quality products in the industry. From the start of the processes to the finish, we find ways to error-proof our processes, and we use automation to continue to improve our quality.
We've done a lot in automating our calibration and testing processes, taking some of the operator variability out, gives us a better quality, more consistent product.
Estamos convencidos que ser el recurso que nos dirige hacia obtener nuestra misión es la gente. Por lo tanto, creemos firmemente que invertir y desarrollar a nuestro personal hace que obtengamos las mejores soluciones para nuestro cliente.
SEL continues to add manufacturing processes in-house. We found that we can build the parts better than we can buy them, and that helps us continue to deliver a superior product. This focus on vertical integration means we can charge our customers less for the product, and we can respond faster to their needs. SEL offers worldwide 10-year warranty on all our products. However, we've never charged a customer for repair.
So one of the cool things about SEL manufacturing, when we automate something, that operator whose job we've automated is now running that automation that's doing their job. Any improvements we're making, we do that with a mindset of improving dignity of work and job enrichment, but at the same time it's to improve our quality, reduce our lead times. The end result is going to be benefit to employee owners and also the customer in regards to fulfilling our mission of making electric power safer, more reliable, and more economical.
At SEL, we have world-class manufacturing processes. We have beautiful facilities and latest and greatest technology, and I invite everyone to come and see that.
No, don't go right off the other job at SEL.
Can I interject?
Yeah.
You've discussed the possibility of kind of having a day away. Would it be possible to take a field trip?
I'll ask. That's a great
I
idea.
wonder how open they are to.
They said
Come
feel
and see.
free. I think they said feel free to just like come
Day
walk in.
in.
Yeah.
Although we're not exactly competitors, so, you know.
We could go to the opposite of lean. We go to Fairchild Air Force Base. A day away, 2 days.
I like
away.
manufacturing.
That's, I'll ask. That's not a bad idea.
Before I worked at SEL, I did a short stint at a small startup in Moscow called CC Benefits. That was while I was going to school, and actually Jared's not here, but Jared helped me write my first Hello World program in a small computer lab on campus. And then I started at CC Benefits, where Andrew promptly tried to undo everything that the classes had taught me about good programming. So I got a glimpse into Emsi's beginnings there. And when I came back 3.5 years ago, obviously the way Deacon described Emsi now is much different. We're growing steadily. We were about to be bought by CS when I started, and we're leading our field. It makes my job of persuasion a little more difficult. I actually think that Emsi's already doing a lot of the lean ideas, at least in part. But I want to suggest quickly here 4 different ways that we can go about maybe propagating the success that we're experiencing now. 1 is to develop a culture that does not tolerate abnormalities. 2 is to develop a culture that solves problems to create knowledge. 3 is to develop a culture that always delivers value quickly. And then 4 is what I think SEL is already doing well, and I'll get to that at the end. But first, develop a culture that does not tolerate abnormalities. I wear this lanyard every day because it's a holdover from my SEL days. Once they got big enough to where not everybody knew each other, they had to figure out a way to secure. They had locks on their buildings like we do, but they were a lot more protective of their trade secrets. And anyone that didn't have a lanyard, or at least a badge, was identified pretty easily because of that. I recognize now I'm the abnormality, but it's a psychological way to put me in a mindset of looking for those kinds of things. I want to tell you a quick story that is in the book. In 1950, Toyota went bankrupt, and Toyota is where a lot of these ideas are coming from. They had to lay off. They almost went bankrupt. They had to lay off 1/3 of their workforce, and out of that, the Toyota production system was born because they told themselves they never wanted to experience that again. They became known as the leader in quality automotively until some just recent issues. But I want to contrast that to GM, which was bailed out by the government in the last 10 years. They're in congressional hearings now over recalls of just this year alone, 24 million vehicles because of 61 crashes that have resulted in, I think the count right now is 16 deaths. Those are tied to a faulty ignition switch that was discovered in 2001, and it was covered up. And because that decision was made, 16 people lost their lives. And at GM now, about the same number have lost their jobs over it. Like I said, Toyota isn't without their own issues. In 2009, they recalled 8 million vehicles because of 5 deaths that had happened as a result of unintentional acceleration. They ended up being slapped this year with the biggest fine ever for the US auto manufacturer. And part of the reason for that is because they withheld information during the investigation. The result is that now the government is regulating the job that Toyota built its reputation on doing, which was building quality into their product. I would argue those problems don't develop overnight. The solution isn't necessarily to send heads rolling. It makes the media happy, but it has to be approached from a different angle. Deming was a guy who went over and consulted with Toyota post-World War II and helped them develop the Toyota production system. And he said this, and I think this is a paraphrase in the book, but he said, when something goes wrong, in all probability, it was caused by the system, which makes it a management problem. In other words, a management of how we do our processes. I don't think it's pointing to particular people, but it's a management of our jobs. Emsi doesn't deal with life or death situations, right? On Monday morning of this week, I came in around 8. I was one of the first people in the building. And I don't know if you know Johnny Sweet. You probably recognize him. He's been working on the building initially and also in follow-up. He came asking me if I knew anything about a pipe that had fallen through the ceiling. And I didn't. I think he left and found Bruce, who then helped him find whoever knew more about the problem. And that's the last I heard of it. But it left me with this nagging curiosity, as it would probably do the same. I don't know if any of you know about this incident, but last Friday, according to Sheridan Bernard, I ended up tracking down where it happened. He's our CS intern for the summer, and he gave me these pictures. And I think he took these pictures from where he was sitting when it happened, which is give or take 3 feet.
Wait, what room is this?
This is CS, and this is the janitorial closet back here. And last Friday, a pipe came through the ceiling. I followed up with Dan. I got a scoop from him, which was basically that during construction, the roofing contractors came across this pipe. They didn't know what it was for. Presumably, they figured out that it wasn't being used. They hacked it off. They laid a new membrane over the top, and end of story. Until the heat wave this summer caused tar to melt, whatever, and the part that they left behind is what you see there on the floor. I asked Dan if he knew what happened to the pipe. He said it probably got thrown away, but I tracked it down. And I hit it.
That's not PVC.
No.
That's a serious pipe.
I'll pass this around if anybody wants to check it out. In fact, I'll just put it right here.
Tar is dry, right?
Tar is dry, it's a little sticky, but
Shoot.
Kill a potato gun.
Yeah, that would kill somebody.
well, exactly, right?
Yeah. Or at least cause some serious injury.
What do you think, someone was doing some truck repair up on the roof, so like an exhaust pipe?
Yeah, it almost looks like one.
Heavy for an exhaust pipe.
Yeah.
Well, I ended up asking Dan, how do we know there aren't more waiting to fall? And he kind of laughed it off and said, well, maybe one day we'll get everybody together and we'll go up in the roof and look for dangling pipes. And I walked away from that thinking, that's just like software development. How many times do we come across something, hack it off, put a new membrane over the top, months later a pipe falls to the ceiling? But in seriousness, until, and I'm not trying to get anybody in trouble here, but until the roofing contractor is contacted to inspect underneath each ceiling tile, we don't know that it won't happen again, which makes every day at Emsi a life or death. In the meantime, customers are still depending on us to deliver the best data in our industry. It's a good opportunity to talk about what the TPS identifies as stop the line. And the idea here is 3 things. Every abnormality is detected. Work stops, or at least the work you were doing when you found it. Your work is refocused on the resolving the cause of the problem before work resumes. And the key point there is a small distinction, but it's actually pretty big, is not solving the problem, but solving the cause of the problem. So figure out why it happened. A couple quotes from the book, and I paraphrase and I quote in different places, but it says, develop a culture that does not tolerate abnormalities, whether it is a broken build or a miscommunication, a failed installation, or code that is not robust enough to hold up in production. Again, it says every abnormality should trigger a search for the root cause, experiments to find the best way to remedy the problem, and a change in process to keep it from resurfacing. It takes a lot of discipline, it creates a lot of knowledge along the way, and it pays huge dividends if we're able to do that. And in Toyota, this was really focused on the frontline workers, the people that were on the manufacturing line. They could basically pull a cord and stop the entire manufacturing process if they noticed something wasn't right, because they wanted to get to the root cause. If you heard in that video from SEL, they've never charged a customer for a repair, even though their warranty is only 10 years. And that's because any opportunity they have to get a defective product is an opportunity for them to learn what's going wrong. And in their case, it is life or death on a regular basis. So develop a culture that does not tolerate abnormalities. Number 2, develop a culture that solves problems to create knowledge. A lot of times we look to just get a problem out of the way, but a core principle of Lean is that doing that, going through that process in a disciplined way, helps us learn more. This plan, do, check, act is again from Deming. It's his take on the scientific method as a way to create knowledge by solving problems. Continuous improvement, like me and Lindsay got going. Another quote from the book: the best way to create knowledge is to find the biggest problem that is getting in the way of your company's success and focus everybody on figuring out how to solve the problem. Go at it one step at a time, check where that got you, and do it again and again and again. Make this the essence of everyone's job. It says it another way later: becoming lean starts with a crisply defined top priority problem that is constraining business success. Once you have a clearly defined problem, the next step is to use a disciplined problem-solving method informed by basic principles to solve the problem. Train everyone how to do this with every aspect of their job. I came up, and I don't know if this is helpful or not, but I came up with the phrase employee expertise for this. I remember learning more on my first 4 months on the job at Schweitzer than I did in my 4 years at University of Idaho, just by the nature of it. You learn by doing, at least I know I do, and so this is kind of a cyclical thing. You experience, you know Latin, you know the root, or the etymology of expertise.
Expertise, well, expert is to try something.
Yeah.
So expertise is to, you've tried it.
Learn by trying.
Learn by doing it.
Yeah. An expert is someone who's learned by trying, and then once you've done that, you put it to work. You put that expertise to work. And one obvious example is building a test before you solve the defect. Break something so that you can find it again later if it comes up. So there's Ovid, and he's curious. Let's see. Yeah, basically take time to be curious. At SEL, they had the mantra of asking why 5 times. And it's easy to say I don't have the time, but that gets back to our second sentence, the second part of the sentence that I shared from our Friday meeting back in February about us not finishing our careers here at Emsi. The point of that presentation was to focus on how Emsi wants us to make us better prepared for whatever's next. At Emsi, I changed when you leave for if you leave, but the idea is that while we're here, if we can take this approach to problem solving, we become experts by learning how to do things the right way. Not only does it make us better people, but it allows us to be part of something bigger, which is a segue into my third point. Continuous improvement is kind of empty if we don't have a purpose that we're doing it for. If we can focus ourselves on a singular purpose, it'll have a greater effect. And the book shares another story from this one's from the Cold War. This is a Sputnik submarine. In 1957, the Soviet I'm sorry, a Polaris submarine. Sputnik was launched by the Soviets in 1957. Just before that, Polaris had been launched as a project to deliver in 1965 was a scheduled completion. But in 1957, once the first Sputnik orbited the Earth, 2 weeks later, the Polaris project was pushed out to 1959, which, if you can think of this kind of a mammoth engineering project, that's a huge change. However, 2.5 years later, the first missiles were launched from this submarine. And I didn't mention, this is a submarine that can launch missiles from underwater. The Russians have already developed the capability to fire missiles from a breached submarine. So they were moving ahead of us in terms of weapons capability. And when Sputnik was passing over the United States, that gave us a real sense of urgency, which I think accounts for the fact that we were able to do this in such a short time frame.
So this is a US sub?
This is a US sub. I don't know exactly which one. I know that the project went over to the UK as well, and by the end of 1960, 2 of these were on patrol. So we take a 9-year engineering project in the context of the Cold War, shorten that to 2.5, give or take, years before it's successful. The book describes it this way: the minute the deadline changed, Technical Director Vice Admiral Levering Smith focused his team on one simple objective: deploy a force of submarines in the shortest possible time. This meant no wasted time, no extra features, and no delays. In short, make every minute count. Does it sound like JP8 to anyone? I think it's a good correlation. The success of Polaris is attributed to the technical leadership of Admiral Smith and his laser-like focus on synchronized increments of technical progress. The option-based approach to developing components, the emphasis on reliability, and this is the point I want to make, the deep sense of mission among all participants. So besides our Wi-Fi password, what is Emsi's Soviet Union? You know, it could be burning glass. It could be this nebulous idea of change. But we know that we're not dealing with layoffs, we're not dealing with recalls, and we're not in the middle of the Cold War. So how do we answer the question? I think Lean offers us a unifying paradigm, a unifying framework, and also an opportunity to get greater enjoyment out of our work. And the unity is around this common goal of blessing our customers. So the first point I made was developing a culture that doesn't tolerate abnormalities. The second is solving problems to create knowledge. The third is developing a culture that always delivers value. The book says it this way: the goal of lean development should be to find ways to delight customers by understanding their situation deeply and solving their problem completely. Great software development organizations, and I stuck in the word relentlessly here, they relentlessly develop a deep sense of customer value and continually delight their customers. Another way to say this is to create nothing but value. The third chapter in the book is on value. I found it to be kind of invaluable in terms of the other chapters, just like I thought the chapter on waste was kind of a waste of my time. But I summarized it this way: customers are delighted by a product when their world is understood in such a way that meets a need they didn't know they had. And developing that kind of product is achieved by focusing on the job the customer needs to do. Expert leadership, explicit accountability, excellent communication, and exceptional teamwork are indispensable characteristics of a customer-focused organization. When we focus on delivering value to the customer, the book described it as an analogy, the idea of a crew team. I've never rode road crew, but my father-in-law did, in the Naval Academy. In fact, this is a picture that Stephanie found this morning. That's him, second from the left. And the idea is pretty straightforward. Crew teams are on every motivational poster you can find, but everyone's sitting in line, everyone's focused on one common goal, and they have a coxswain at the head directing effort. If I look at where we sit, it's hard to get that really deep sense of customer need and customer value from within a data cave. It means reaching out. If you think about what it would look like for the data department to be actively engaged with regularly meeting MG's customers' needs, our org chart is something. I'm not suggesting that we shake it up or anything, but if you look at it, it emphasizes function rather than flow of value. we all need each other. We all need the other departments. We need CS, we need sales, we need dev, accounting, and finance, HR. But we're all in these separate parts of the building, and unless we are talking to each other, communication was mentioned by Deacon as a problem. How can we focus on this idea of the flow of value? It's easy to say CS is someone else's job. But Ed Schweitzer over at SEL used to play a game in our Friday meetings with new people. He'd say, raise your hand if you're not in sales. Because in his mind, everybody was in sales. Everybody was responsible for the product that we were shipping out the door. It takes going out of your comfort zone. But if we work together, we end up blessing each other, and we also end up blessing the customer. We get a pride out of delivering that value. It's important to feel like we're making a difference, and I think it's important to feel like we're doing it on a regular basis. And this, if we go back to this slide, and I'll just quickly, the idea of delivering in the book is described as the time an order is placed to the time it starts generating revenue. To measure that cycle time and to do it on a repeatable basis, so doing it always. The book says lean cycle time is the reliable, repeatable cadence at which capable development processes transform identified customer needs into the delivered customer value. It is this cycle time that paces the organization, causes value to flow, forces quality to be built into the product, and clarifies the capacity of the organization. So instead of trying to do everything once, try to establish a cadence of continuous improvement. The book also talks about Boeing as an example. Boeing, this is a 777. I don't know if it's an original 777 or not, but they...
$200. Long range.
Okay.
It's not original. It's not the first one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it was a really revolutionary product, and also revolutionary in the way they developed it. The head of the company pretty much staked the company's success on this project. It was in partnership with United. If you've read the book, you know this story. But the success of the project was described this way. The groundbreaking, actually this is my summary of it, but the groundbreaking managerial and technical success of the Boeing 777 was owed to identifying two sources of delays in previous projects and fundamentally solving them. First, people were not looking for problems early enough or paying attention when the problem arose. The idea of test early and fail fast solved this by testing rigorously at all levels and testing aggressively at every stage of integration. And second, the second source of delay is that people were not working together or communicating with each other promptly and effectively. The idea of share early and share often solved this with a top-down commitment to work on the basis of trust, to regularly expose, discuss, diagnose, and dispose of problems, and to create a ubiquitous pride of workmanship.
They needed to do that with the 787.
Yeah. In fact, PBS did a story. Boeing invited PBS in Seattle in while this plane was being made and said, you have freedom to go wherever you want. Film this thing, and then the result was a documentary, a 5-part documentary that's on YouTube. I haven't actually watched it, but I thought that it might be
I watched it in high school actually, or no, it was like a management class I think in college, and it was fantastic in a number of ways.
Yeah, maybe lunchtime once a week or something. We could probably at least get some fashion tips from it.
I've already got mine on Microsoft.
That's how to become the richest man in the world.
That's right.
You look like a teenager.
Yeah.
He probably was at the time the photo.
Yeah. So we're winding down here, but to review, the first one was develop a culture that does not tolerate abnormalities. Develop a culture, number 2, that solves problems to create knowledge. Develop a culture that always delivers value quickly. And the fourth is what I think Emsi has really found to be the root of its success. Oh, didn't work. Like Aretha Franklin, develop a culture of respect. Respect for people is described by the book as the essential lean principle. It's easy to overlook because it's not a technical principle, but it says it this way. Successful lean initiatives must be based first and foremost on a deep respect for every person in the company. Respecting people means that teams are given general plans and reasonable goals and are trusted to self-organize to meet the goals. Respect means that instead of telling people what to do and how to do it, you develop a reflexive organization where people use their heads to figure this out for themselves. And I want to point out something about what I've covered so far, except for that pipe scenario. I've tried to avoid bringing up examples that are specific in our work. I could probably come up with stories of, data that's had to be retracted, contracts that have been botched, or feature requests that have been lost, code that's had to be overhauled. I think before we do that, it's valuable, but we have to come to terms with the fact that it's a culture, at least according to the Lean book, it's a culture that allows those kinds of things to happen versus individual mistakes. There's a time and place for talking about that kind of thing, but overall, versus thinking about it as people over process, think about the power that can be gained from the combination of those two things. The book says that speed is not hacking, rather excellent reflexes and disciplined stop-the-line culture sustain high speed by building quality in. Speed and discipline are not achieved by processes, standards, and documentation, right? But by engaged thinking people who can be trusted to make good decisions and help each other out. So if that's true, what's our threat? The book says that one root cause, at least, that's been suggested of the failure of lean initiatives is a focus on tools and practices rather than solving basic problems. And then it asks, what is your problem? What is your main problem? So the risk here, as we think about this, is going down a checklist mechanically versus changing our philosophy or our mentality. That is our threat. What is our Rubik's Cube? It could be something as specific as pipes falling through the ceiling. It could be as broad as agility. It could be apathy. We all know the weight of technical debt. We all know how easy it is to say, I'm too busy, I'll do that later. But the challenge here is to think big and start small. The book says, Lean as a management system that creates engaged thinking people at every level of the organization, and most particularly at the front line. If you implement all the Lean principles save one, respect for people, you will reap only a shadow of the potential advantages that Lean can bring. If you implement only one principle, respect for people, you will position the people in your organization to discover and implement the remaining Lean principles. And I think that's what Emsi has done. Respect for people has been at the foundation of Emsi's success. Because of that, each of us has the power to affect positive change by building this stop-line culture, taking the time to be curious, continually delighting our customers, and creating nothing but value for our customers. The book talks a lot about practical ways to implement it, like task switching, time management, prioritization, along with a lot of pretty inspiring success stories. I think it's worth maybe having other discussions about those, but hopefully I've at least planted this idea in your head that Lean is relevant if we want to continue to bless our customers for decades to come.
Thanks. Thank you, Tim.
Has anyone ever offered an explanation of why manufacturing methodology applies to software? As far as I've seen by looking around, I haven't found any.
Well, I think it applies not only to software, but to everything at an organization, which is why I think that it can't be isolated to one department. If you think about looking for errors, for example, that can happen in accounting as easily as it can happen on a manufacturing floor. So the book starts off by saying, yeah, there are some really significant differences between manufacturing software, but we can boil it down to principles that we can then find ways to uniquely apply it in software. You know, you can get into details, but I think it's true. For SEL, that's my only other point of reference. They really excelled at doing it in manufacturing. I think they did have some trouble implementing it in engineering and other departments, but overall, if it wasn't an integrative philosophy where each department was working on the same premise or set of premises, then it wasn't going to work. And certainly, SEL is another success story of how it does.
Yeah, there are definitely success stories of lean in the software world. I was just reading a book, Coders at Work, this afternoon, and the very first, it's a set of interviews, the very first one was with one of the original Netscape guys. And basically the reason...
People who gave the world JavaScript.
That was part of the success story. But what he pointed out is that Netscape succeeded because they focused on delivering, they identified the minimum viable product, so the thing that the minimum feature set they could deliver to customers, and they focused on shipping that as quickly as possible, which is the reason that they succeeded in Netscape was the first real, popular browser. And that struck me actually very strongly. So a lot of what his philosophy was much looser than lean would be, but would basically be that having a perfect system that you ship after 5 years is no good because your competitor will ship in 6 months and you'll be out of business in 1 year, so it doesn't matter. So there's very much that sense of you need to focus on what's paying the bills, what your customers want, and you need to be kind of ruthless about doing that.
Yeah, and the first quote from the book that I mentioned was the empirical approach. It talks about releasing that minimum viable product out and then building a feedback loop. As the customers are getting value, you're getting return on your investment, and it builds instead of getting, like Justin said, perfect before you release it.
I think another area that is really valuable is the every problem is a failure of the system, not an individual. Blaming a person for or a group for bad stuff being shipped, well, the system should be in place such that that sort of thing wouldn't happen. So, broad brush strokes of development issue, came out, designed a product and developed it and then gave it to customers, and after $100,000 worth of investment, customers are like, well, this isn't help at all. Like, you can't go back to development or whatever and just be like, why did you create this problem or this product that doesn't solve anybody's problems? That's not a problem with the developers. That's a problem with the system that allowed this thing to go out without talking to anybody, and we can certainly apply that to our own selves. I think about that in terms of, I've been writing Justin, for example, on working on this demographics process and saying we should have a test for that. And Justin very reasonably is this is simple math. But the problem is we can't trust data coming in from the Census Bureau to add up perfectly all the time. And that's no assumptions. And that's one of the big things that's been a problem throughout the data department, since inception, was assuming, oh, well, the data that's coming in is good, so I will, so it doesn't cross your mind. And at this point, we need to be like, well, the system needs to make sure that we test that, because we can't assume that that's going to be the case. And so something that doesn't seem intuitive to reasonable people like Justin, I'm now calloused enough in life and full of guile such that I'd say, test everything.
You have enough scars.
Yeah, I'm just bitter, is really what it is. So those are things that, it's not intuitive to say like, oh, U.S. Census Bureau, we need to, test the heck out of that data. But the system is designed in such a way, or we're trying to get the system in such a way where it's like, well, we need tests for that. Test it, build another test, and then test to make sure your test works. Because that way when something does go wrong, or when we do get bad data in, it's not, Justin, why didn't this work? He's like, well, I assumed that 100 males and 100 females means 200 total people, not 205. So that's the idea. And that's, I think,
There's still that gray area, transgender.
Doesn't mean they count twice.
I think there's a degree of separation, because we don't want to blame individuals, it is within our power to change the way we think about things and the way we do things. So if there's any discussion of blame, it should be centered around that process. And that does involve the people doing the work, bringing in their experience to figure out how to change the world.
Yeah, and that's the, like you were saying, the 5 whys. You need to ask why. Why did the demographic? I'm sorry, I'm picking on you now. But why did the demographics process fail? Oh, that's because Justin's code didn't handle the fact that males and females don't equal total. Okay, but why did that cause a problem? Well, that's because we didn't test it. Why didn't we test it? Well, that's because we didn't do a code review, or we didn't ask the right questions in a code review. Why wasn't that caught? Well, that's because the person who checked in the code didn't check for that. And ultimately it comes right back to me, right? You need to be able to ask enough whys that's like, well, why is Deacon still? Then that's that if it falls on anybody, it's an organizational problem, and therefore that falls back on me. So that means I'm sorry.
Can I do a quick survey here? Who here works on a project that we have continuous integration testing for? Okay.
Is that email?
And then of those people, has the continuous integration ever caught a problem that you caused? All right, so Chris is going to.
Chris doesn't cause problems.
So,
You threw your fired, Chris.
No, that means you didn't notice that.
That's why I just enabled emailing when it fails.
yeah, I learned 2 lessons there. The first one, most important one, is we need to get more of our projects continuously integrated.
Well, the problem is that with legacy, I don't know how you exactly test that one, but certainly the other projects you're getting out into. You do work on a project that does have continuous integration.
You've also noticed.
All right. I didn't know the question meant.
By the way, are all the R scripts tested?
No, that's what we're working on.
Oh, yeah, we're
Because we have some, like
All
those-
of them are not tested.
Because I like
100%
There's like some tests that, like I
You
run-
can't say that in such a way that it sounds good.
Yeah.
There are some tests that I run at the end, but like Jared and I were talking about, and I mentioned it to Deacon, that we're doing like high-level math, and you can't just write, hey, when we add these 2, it should equal the number, so let's make a test. 4 + 4 = 8. Well, I can't write something that does that when I do an ARIMA function at the forecast. Hey, let's do a forecast on, this 20 data set. This is what the forecast should be. That's kind of that problem. Like, how do we write that? And
I think Matt's come across that problem. And we can talk more about this later, but you've come across this sort of problem where it's write a unit test that's fairly simple, and you do it in Excel.
Yeah.
And then you calculate what your results should be in Excel. And then
Except that Excel doesn't have a ring.
Yeah, but I think in the case of
Or
to take the JPA projections as an example, I I kind of had that, like, well, I can't test that, but then and then we're going, and we didn't do a code review at first, and now I see the product, I like push some data to dev, and it's garbage. And I was relying on our functions that really, like, I don't think I was wrong in thinking that a function should have worked a certain way. But then when it didn't, it is my fault that I didn't say, I need to test and make sure that, you know, the biggest job poster is not gonna say, I'm not projecting that the biggest job poster that's been growing like immensely is gonna be 0 jobs. Like a simple test is this projection non-zero for a big set of data? Like, I mean, that's, you know, that's something that you can test that you don't even have to know what the forecast actually is. And on a smaller scale, if you're forecasting a lot of things, make a smaller data frame. If now the more people are using R, it's worth just talking in R terms. But, you know, if you're operating on many large data frames, make one small data frame and make sure that it does everything you expect it to do. Do an ARIMA forecast on just that one part. And make sure that when you do that on that test data frame, that it works the same every time. Because if you change things, as I've been doing, stuff breaks and you get really confused, angry, and.
Though another thing that I mentioned to Matt, since other people make forecasts, is that we use the right forecast tool.
Yeah.
ARIMA isn't the right forecast tool for everything. There's different forecasting tools based on the amount of observations you have. If you have any questions on forecasting, I can probably answer those. If you have questions on programming, go to the other Justin. If you have questions on statistics, I can help with that. But yeah, I mentioned to Matt once he told me, I was like, I don't think that's probably the right way you want to go about that, which maybe would have alleviated problems in the beginning.
Well, this is something that, you know, it's nice to rely on a group of people, but we don't really, like now we have 4 people in the US
But we all work on
group.
different things.
And at the beginning of the year, more or less, we had 2, if we even had a US group specifically, you know? But we were all like meeting and talking about stuff, but I don't know. But now we have this group where, yeah, I don't know what ARIMA or what model to use. So now Justin's here, he can take a look at that, and I don't have to worry about that, you know?
So there's, I'm gonna cut this meeting off real quick, not to. But I mean, all of this actually is really valuable, and you know, there's a number of things that talking about the process that I'm thinking about, and you know, would like to get some of your input on later. But ultimately, I think going back to Tim's talk, is that we do need to be thinking about what we're giving to our customers, and you know that we need to be, you know, as far as respecting people, like part of that is just respecting our customers, and you know, and if we're feeling like I would much rather get a crappy product out sooner than do the right product, you know, a little bit longer, which is honestly the you know, I've been doing this for 12 years, so for about 12 years maybe, I've been thinking I don't have time to test. I don't have time to do it that way because this has to get out and this has to be done. And the problem is it always, every single time, takes at least twice as long when you don't do it right. And it's not it's not loving customer service, it's not loving sales, it's not loving our customers, it's not loving development, it's not loving your wife, it's not loving your children, it's not loving anybody.
Your coworkers.
Yeah, if it's just like
in your same group.
yeah, I mean and again that's sort of an organizational thing, and there's a number of things that that I you know like to do at some point and talk about, but regardless. It's just always better to do it right at the outset, and not cut corners, despite the fact that I encourage people to do it all the time. I'm really trying not to. You know, nothing is too important that we should cut corners. And very few people. Well, yeah.
Cool.
Do you have any?
One, I guess, and that is, just because I didn't put any specific examples in here, doesn't mean I didn't come up with any. And most of the ones I came up with didn't have to do with data. Most of them had to do with data and this group, data and that group. We can solve all of our problems within our department, and if we don't look outside of this group, that accomplishment is not going to get us very far. I don't know what the right answer is. That's for these guys, but I think it really has to take a diligence to reach out across these organizational boundaries and try to work together, to come to an agreement on what the problem is, and then work together to find the solution. We've got a lot of different personality types at this company, and I'm easily left in my cubicle without being bothered, but that doesn't push forward the idea of delivering value to the customer. So.
Yeah, and that's, I think that goes to kind of what I was saying before, which is understanding priorities, and just know that, what I'm asking for and what I want you to ask for is for priorities. And when I ask for priorities, that's, the job posting, analytics and everything that goes along with that. That was me saying, Andrew, how important is this? Because we've got these other things, and him saying, this is the thing that I care about the most. This is the thing. If we get nothing else done, we need to get this stuff out. And that was incredibly freeing for everybody. Even though it might be a little bit annoying that your process now has to wait because there's job postings that are running for a week and a half, but that's the highest priority. And so going to defining priorities. Those aren't just department priorities or just John's priorities, but that's company priorities as well. And that's something that we've been talking about because we've got 100 and something people here at the company. We all need to be pushing in the same direction.
Focus as a company.
Yes.
Cool.
Thank you, Tim.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Tim. That was a good time. That was good.
And I'm going to be keeping that pipe at my cubicle as a reminder.
And also to fend off zombies.
Yeah. So watch your heads.
Your cubicle to fend off other pipes.
Mounted.
Your pipes are territorial. Just the modules are most used. Well, most used. They're all used because they were all written.
They'll fall in the cubicle.
Oh, wait, I forgot to mention one other thing that I was going to mention. When Tim asked, how many people have seen the book, read the book, looked at the book, smelled the book. I encourage you to read it. And it is a really good book, so you should do it. I'm planning on revisiting it again.
It's written by a husband and wife, and I'm pretty sure I can pick out which chapter's written by the wife and by the husband. And the wife's a much better writer, so I can try to steer you if you just have time for a chapter.
Nice, that's pretty fun.
Thanks, Tim.
I think it's on more specifics as well, because a lot of this is